Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to have a chance to introduce somebody who is a dear friend, somebody who has been coming to Slovakia for many years, and somebody who in some ways, we've been joking over the past few days, might be considered a honorary Slovak given how many times he's been here before. But first and foremost, he has got many accomplishments in the area of pro-life advocacy. He's been an insider and a veteran of all matters related to pro-life affairs in Washington, D.C. So without further ado, let me introduce Professor Saunders, who is a graduate of Harvard Law School. He has been involved in issues of public policy, law, and ethics for 30 years. He is a member of the Academic Advisory Board of the Victims of Communism Museum and Foundation. He is the Chair Emeritus of the Federalist Society Religious Liberty Division, and formerly Senior Counsel at Americans United for Life. He is a regular columnist for the National Catholic Bioethics Quarterly and has written widely on these topics, as well as on Catholic social teaching. His latest book, Unborn Human Life and Fundamental Rights, Leading Constitutional Cases Under Scrutiny, was published in 2019. He's director of the program in human rights at the Institute of Human Ecology at the Catholic University of America, and the director of the Center for Human Rights there. Professor Saunders, I invite you on the stage. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Samuel, and thank you to the organizers of the conference. I'm happy to be here. I used to, a few years ago, was involved in some of these efforts in Europe and internationally. I haven't done that so much recently. It's nice to see some of my old friends who I haven't seen for a long time. So I am so happy to be able to tell you about the greatest achievement of my life, of my lifetime, which is the overturning of Roe v. Wade. I know you've all heard of Roe v. Wade, and you all know it was overturned by the Dobbs case by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2022. I don't, though, imagine you know American law, no reason you should, but to understand Roe v. Wade, you just need a little bit of understanding of U.S. law. So let me just provide that. First, our Constitution says very little about the role of the courts. You know, we have a federalist system of government, which means separated, divided powers. We have states who have a lot of power. According to our Constitution, the national government only has the power that is specifically delegated and given to it, and the Supreme Court has the least amount of power between the executive and the legislative branch, and the Founding Fathers, in fact, called it the least dangerous branch because it didn't have an army and it couldn't control expenditures, so it wasn't dangerous. But in fact, as you know, in 1973, the Supreme Court of the United States said there was a constitutional right to abortion. And, you know, amazingly, I think in a certain sense it said there was a human right, an international right, because so many countries, and unfortunately probably your countries, paid a lot of attention to that decision, kind of as if it were, you know, a decision of some worldwide or heavenly court that could decide everything. It doesn't have that power. But when I come to Europe, and I teach here in Slovakia every summer in the Free Society Seminar, almost every year the Supreme Court's term ends at the end of June, and it saves all the controversial cases until the end of June. So I'm usually coming to Slovakia right after the Supreme Court or just before the Supreme Court announces a very controversial decision. And I'm always amazed by the media in Europe, how they cover these pending cases. Again, it's like this international human rights court is about to make a ruling. I remember when I came just before the Supreme Court issued the Obergefell decision saying there's a right to same-sex marriage under the U.S. Constitution. And it was the same way. It was like, in the press really builds the idea that this is the decision of this issue, that should, in some sense, form everybody's opinion. You know, I reject that because all our Supreme Court is the U.S. Supreme Court. It's a national court. And I think when it makes a bad decision, nobody should pay any attention to it at all. And Roe v. Wade is probably the worst decision of all time. I don't have time to go through it, but any of you who are lawyers, go read it. It does not find a right to abortion by closely examining provisions of the Supreme Court. I think those of you who are legislators, it will actually reads like a legislative analysis, kind of this argument is here, and this argument is here, and this concern is here, and when we put them all together, we decide there's a right to abortion. That's not the role of the courts. Now, the one thing I do want to emphasize is that immediately after Roe v. Wade, pro-life Americans protested. Immediately before Roe v. Wade, most states did not have abortion. There was a couple that did, a couple that were changing their laws, but it certainly was not in any sense a pro-abortion country. And then, so as soon as Roe v. Wade was announced, at the first anniversary, we had the first March for Life. And any of you who've ever been to America, particularly before Dobbs, and during that time, I hope you attended the March for Life, because I think it's the greatest human rights event in the world. For 50 years, we marched. And we marched in a country in which the media unrelentingly said there was a right to abortion, in which every organ of power, Hollywood or the academics, the universities, all the societal influencers, of course there's a right to abortion. But for 50 years, pro-lifers marched. And in America, they marched because of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church brought the marchers to Washington. The Catholic bishops uniformly supported the March for Life. People would drive in buses from all over the country. There are famous examples. The kids, like at Notre Dame, which is in Indiana, which is some distance away from Washington, would get in the buses. They'd drive to Washington. They'd sleep at Catholic high schools. Some of them slept in the lower crypt of the big shrine we have in Washington called the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. And they marched. And the anniversary of Roe v. Wade is in winter. It's in the worst time in Washington. It's a kind of a joke among pro-lifers that we picked the worst date of the year to march. But it was picked because it was the anniversary date, and I didn't start the march. The people who started it wanted people to never forget. So it might be snowing, it might be sleeting, it might be so cold you can't feel your fingers, but they marched every year. And part of that marching was to tell politicians to change that horrible decision. So Republicans became the pro-life party. Historically in America, the Democrats had plenty of pro-lifers. The shame and scandal of the Democratic Party is it forced the pro-life people out of the Democratic Party. I was a Democrat. I told somebody recently, Robert Casey, who is the governor of Pennsylvania, the fifth largest state in America, he's what we call a blue-collar Democrat. He supported a lot of social policies to help working people, but he was pro-life. So they wouldn't let him speak at the national convention. So the Republican Party was the only party to become that the pro-life message would be heard. So some presidents you've certainly heard of, Ronald Reagan and George Hubert Walker Bush. We have 9 justices on the Supreme Court, and they put 3 justices on the court once they got into power. So in 1992, we had the second most important case on abortion, which is called Planned Parenthood v. Casey. And in that case, we had 4 justices who were ready to overturn Roe v. Wade. So this was about 20 years after Roe. So 4 justices wanted to overturn it. So we got a 9-member court. So all we need is 1 more justice. We got 5, and Roe v. Wade is gone. So what justices were left? Well, there were those 3 Republicans, those 3 conservatives that Reagan and Bush appointed. All we need is 1 of those 3 to join the 4, and Roe v. Wade is overturned in 1992. And all 3 of them voted to uphold Roe. It's in some ways the worst day, one of the worst days in American history. But we learned a lesson that day, which was you can't simply appoint a, quote, conservative judge to the court. And what pro-life people have to demand is something else. They have to demand judges who have the right judicial philosophy. And in America, the conservative lawyers, myself included, after Planned Parenthood v. Casey, examined how they came to such a bad decision. And they did what you guys here in Europe call living constitution. They claim the power of a judge is to understand principles in light of evolving circumstances. And they defined one word in the Constitution, the word liberty, to include abortion. Well, we thought that was ridiculous, and we developed a theory called originalism, which says you apply the law. The job of the judge is to apply the law, not to make law, not to evolve the law, not to tell us what he thinks the law should be. I don't give a diddle what he thinks the law should be. I want the law that the people pass to be applied. And if that law is unjust, I'm going to change that law. So the philosophy of originalism looks at the Constitution and it says, what is the original public meaning of the document? And like I told you, you just have to trust me, there's not a word about abortion in the Constitution. They concocted abortion out of the word liberty. So this originalism, then it took 30 more years. 30 years of people being aborted. But finally, the pro-life movement, which now demanded not just a conservative judge, but a judge who understood how absurd Roe v. Wade was. And Donald Trump appointed 3 of them to the Supreme Court, all of whom were originalists. And there were two originalists already on there. So this time, the 3, quote, Republican justices that Trump appointed joined the 2 originalists who were already on the court, and they overturned Roe v. Wade in the Dobbs case. I hope that you could kind of understand it as a matter of how the American law had to be done. What we did was we identified the problem, and the problem was a wrong judicial philosophy, a wrong understanding of the role of the judge. They gave the judge too much power to do what the judge thinks is good. Now, just to show you how dangerous this is and that it's not a one-time thing and that it's a cancer that has to be cut out, it was the same justices with the same language who found the right to same-sex marriage in the Obergefell case. The same judges, the same language. This was before the Dobbs case. This was, I think, in 2017. So the same judges with the bad philosophy that in 1992 upheld Roe v. Wade under this crazy idea of liberty, which is liberty means you get to define the meaning of the universe, and somehow the government has to respect that. It's an incoherent philosophy which I can't go into. I hope it's obvious. That would be pure chaos. I don't care what your definition of life in the universe is. You don't have an unrestricted right to do whatever you want to under liberty that the Constitution must protect. But anyway, they use that same understanding in Obergefell to find same-sex marriage existed. So we identified the problem, which was this bad judicial philosophy. We developed a sound judicial philosophy that understood the role of the judges to apply the law. And the conservative lawyers are all kind of connected to an organization called the Federalist Society. Now, everything I speak about is my own views, not any institutions and not the Federalist Societies, but the Federalist Society, which doesn't take a position on issues, did support this judicial philosophy. And many judges and many lawyers, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands. Right now, the annual convention is in Washington, D.C. of the Federalist Society. It has over 65,000 lawyers. It has over 10,000 law students. It has thousands of faculty members. And they're judicial members of it. That philosophy, which was first put forth by Ed Meese, who was the Attorney General to Ronald Reagan, eventually persuaded the legal profession. Justice Elena Kagan, who is a liberal, who was the former dean of Harvard Law School, has said publicly, we're all originalists now. We're all originalists now. The role of the judge is to apply the law. So I know my time's up, but I just want you to know that the way we overturned Roe v. Wade it took an awful long time. So for you, I think the lesson is persevere. As the Bible says, do not grow weary. Keep fighting for the truth. Because the March for Life, like I said, went for 50 years. When everybody in America supposedly was pro-abortion, the marchers came, and they brought those students. And I look out of my window, and I worked on what we call Capitol Hill in Washington, where the government sits. And I would see those marchers, and I was told by the media that these were old, angry people. I look out that window, and I saw young, happy people, joyful people, people that can build a culture of life and are necessary to defeat a culture of death. So that perseverance, even though it takes a long time to achieve it, is essential. Identifying the real problem and honing in on it. It wasn't just politicians who promised to appoint a conservative. It was politicians who must, because we will work against them and vote against them if they don't deliver the right kind of justice. Not one who says he's conservative, but who likes to play tennis with the liberals in Washington or go up to Harvard, where I went to law school, and be feted by the liberal law professors, but somebody who understands the proper role of the judge. So I know those are American circumstances. They're not yours, and I know you're from many countries. But I hope they'll give you some insights for how we did it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Milí priatelia, náš summit je summit kresťansky ladeného konzervativizmu. A preto nám nie je ľahostajný osud kresťanov na blízkom... Teraz plynulo prejdeme k panelu o pro-life politike, ktoré cieľom je ochrana ľudského života, ľudskej dôstojnosti. Na Blízky východ si ešte počkáme. Skôr než odovzdám slovo moderátorovi, dovolte mi informovať vás aj o programe, ktorý prebieha paralelne v Štúrovom salóne, kde o malú chvíľu začne diskusia s názvom Woke ako nová totalita pod patronátom magazínu European Conservative, ktorý je tiež partnerom konzervatívneho summitu. Dobre, zdá sa, že tu v sieni ústavy sme už pripravení, tak odovzdávam slovo moderátorovi Patrikovi Daniškovi, predsedovi Inštitútu pre ľudské práva a rodinnú politiku, aby predstavil panel hostí a uviedol prvú prednášku. Nech sa páči, Patrik.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Let me introduce on my right side Mr. Jerzy Kwaśniewski, well-known Polish lawyer, public figure, president of the Ordo Iuris Institute for Legal Culture. Well, Ordo Iuris is also very well known for many in Slovakia for its pro-life leadership. So, welcome. Mr. Krzysztof Bosak is a deputy marshal of Polish Sejm. He is leader of Ruch Narodowy National Movement Party. In the past, he was actively engaging in various social media and political initiatives, such as the Independent March. In 2020, he was the candidate for the presidential election for Confederacja. Mihail Neamtu is Romanian author, theologian, and public intellectual, member of the Chamber of Deputies of Romanian Parliament for the political party Alliance for the Union of Romanians. And Professor Saunders was already introduced. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming here, and I will ask Mr. Bosak for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much. I will try to explain a little bit situation in Poland according to legal system and pro-life issue to understand more how developed that we have now the legal situation that is formally securing unborn baby's life, but at the same time we still struggle with some risks and lacks in our legal system. So first I will start how it happened. So to understand what is important to know is that it was not one event in Polish legal evolution of our legal system or political life to change the legislation about securing unborn babies. It was a constant struggle since the time of communism, and especially in 80s, 90s, and later, with many attempts, well-developed social movement. I remember this even from my youth, from my childhood, that there were in 90s big marches against abortion, exactly. So this is the first thing I would like to underline. It was not one point, it was rather a constant pressure by ordinary Polish faithful Catholics who were putting pressure on politicians and some brave politicians who were trying to put forward this agenda, a pro-life agenda, in Polish political life and public life. It was very controversial always. It was not like there was any consensus, not in 90s, not later, not today. There was never any consensus about that. If anybody say that there was a compromise on this or that, it's completely not true. We were in a constant struggle with pro-abortion movement, and we still are in Poland in a constant conflict. Pro-abortion movement in Poland is, in my opinion, quite strong. Now they are, let's say, legally in not so good position, but their influence in universities, media, they are still much stronger, in my opinion, than we are. So this is the first. Second, there were many attempts to improve the situation. Some of them succeed and many didn't. So it is important to know it, yes? There were many citizens' bill, for example, many initiatives. I remember when I was youngest member of parliament 20 years ago, there was an initiative of making amendment to constitution to make it clear in our constitution that the right to life is for everybody since the beginning of the life, even in the mother's womb. And we didn't succeed. It was blocked by right-wing politicians that time. These politicians are still in politics. They officially are pro-life, but unofficially they blocked it. We had majority that time. We had president, but leadership was not in favor. So it's a constant conflict also between politicians who are pro-life and politicians who are in the leadership, and they try to be pragmatic about every voter, also about these voters who do not support pro-life agenda, they don't care, or even they are so-called right-wing voters, but not to ban the abortion, not to secure the life of unborn babies. What is important to know that legal abortion in Poland was blocked in 90s, not by politicians, because right-wing politicians were too weak in 90s. It was blocked by judges, by conservative judges. Today they are maybe not even conservative, maybe they are mainstream judges, but it was blocked in 90s by the sentence of Constitutional Court. It was made exactly in 1997. So that time we had a post-communist majority in our parliament. They made abortion legal for everybody, for no matter what is the reason, for everybody. And then Constitutional Court decided that it is not in line with the Constitution. So this is how it happened first, that it was made illegal. Then we had another decision of Constitutional Court in 2008, in the same direction, and after many years and many attempts to change the law, blocked by politicians, in 2010, in 2015, 16, 17, when we had a right-wing majority in parliament, every citizen's bill to extend the guarantee of life was blocked by politicians. After that, in 2020, there were many, let's say, right-wing judges appointed to Constitutional Court, and they made decision to make it illegal to kill unborn babies because of the diagnosis that they could be with some disabilities. And it was so controversial that politicians in government were afraid even to publish it. And they were waiting many months before they printed this, and made it official. So we had this decision of the Constitutional Tribunal. We had right-wing president, right-wing majority in parliament, and this new sentence of Constitutional Court, which was pro-life, was not made officially and binding and working because only of this pragmatism of mainstream right-wing politicians. I remember this exactly because I was the only one member of parliament who, on the day of the decision of Constitutional Court, went with pro-life people in front of the Constitutional Court and show his joy about the decision, made a photo of myself with this gesture, and it was a start of few years of attacks on me by leftists, feminists, pro-abortion people, because they believed that everybody who supports pro-life decision is evil and should be punished. And they made very big protests in front also of houses of pro-life leaders, chanting their names, being very aggressive, attacking churches in the whole country. There were months that we organized a civil guard to defend churches. Some churches still today are still with red red paint, yes, with red paint on the facade. They interrupted holy masses, so it was known as a women's protest. But we of course know that it was only part of the society, this left wing, and it was driven by far left organizations and pro-abortion. LGBT movement joined, some radical left joined, also some progressive liberals, unfortunately, which are now a big part of civic coalition, which is in government now. What happened next? After a few months, as I remember, they made official this sentence of Polish Constitutional Court. Probably it changed how our healthcare system works, but we still don't know how far the situation changed. From the first day that it was working, pro-abortion doctors and scientists, journalists, experts, and everybody started to look for some way how to go around, bypass this new legislation. And unfortunately, we have some other options in our legal system. So the change was not so big, in fact. This is an important thing. And after a few months, during right-wing government, they established a special committee in the ministry to find an interpretation how to still manage the abortion in hospitals in this new legal situation. I underline this, it was still during the right-wing government, so-called, in Poland. So we see that it's like a game, yes? One option is closed, other option is opened. It's a constant pressure from both sides. It's not a situation that is going to the end, yes? This committee used the opportunity in legal system that abortion is legal if the health of the mother is in the threat. They try to extend the meaning of the health of the mother also to the mental condition, which is in fact very it's based on the opinion of the doctor. What does he think? Yes. After making abortion, it is impossible to investigate anything about mental condition. So we knew that there are many situations. Some pro-abortion doctors are even proud and official with it that they give papers that if you need abortion, they will write you whatever you want. And some doctors are also proud about making abortion. They call it helping women. Helping women, they call it securing their lives. There were some very controversial and very loud cases in hospitals that somebody died, a young woman died in the hospital. They are always used by the media against pro-life people. After many months, sometimes after many years, we know what happened when the court will finish and the prosecutor's office and court will finish investigating. So, for example, now we know that one of the famous loud situations that one young lady died in the hospital was because of bad treating by the doctor, not by the legal system. And in fact, this lady was pro-life. She wanted her son to be born, and probably doctor was pro-abortion. But media don't care about the facts. They show always that it's it's a fault of the right-wing people, pro-life people, and that if something bad happened, it is because of this bad, they think it's because of sentence of a constitutional court. So it's in my opinion very important, because this is like a game without any rules. They can use any fact in any way against us. And it's only about propaganda, in fact, unfortunately. But there are also some good things in the situation. I think that constant pressure and constant activism of pro-life movement shifted situation a little bit. So now it's more socially acceptable to be pro-life official. There are many people who are pro-life, not only pro-life leaders, but journalists, politicians, sportsmen, actors who say, I'm pro-life, and it's normal. I would call it like a casual pro-life posture. That it's not your main topic, yes, that you are pro-life, but you do something in public life, and at the same time you are pro-life. So it's good that we see this. Another thing which is good is that it looks like pro-abortion people are stronger in older generation, and younger generation is a little bit. I don't know how long it will last. I hope it will develop, but we saw it a few years ago that younger generation is a little bit more pro-life than older generation. I believe it is because of science, it's because of images that we have, because of knowledge about how abortion procedures look like, because of activism, because of giving people honest information, and because of many people who were very brave in this fight, in this conflict, saying openly what they think, what they know, which is quite complicated. I follow this debate more than 10 years being in the details, more than 20 years being pro-life, but not knowing every detail. And I will say honest, it's very complicated on the medical, from the medical perspective, from legal perspective. There are so many things you have to know to be good in debating with pro-abortion doctors and pro-abortion lawyers, that not many people are ready. And so this is also the need of education, educating good speakers, good leaders. And there were also in Poland many attempts to create a team of good speakers, but it's a constant challenge to create a good team of people who will defend good values in public, being at the same time doing this in this way to be accepted by the majority, yes? Not to only attract the minority who is already pro-life, but to be accepted by the majority. And in fact, our enemies is looking for the same effect, yes? So they are trying to change their language, change their agenda, to be accepted by the majority. So last remark, the battle is not over, but we managed to do something in Poland, and now we have to extend and to develop. One more thing to add, I believe that many people who also pray also helped us. Without these prayers, it would be impossible, I think. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bosak, thank you very much for your opening remarks. I was thinking about what could we talk about, and I see there is a difference in the United States and different situation in Europe as regarding when the abortions became legal. In the United States, it was made through court mostly, and it was a democratic society. While in our countries, Central European countries, it was brought from Soviet Union, it was imposed to us from outside in a totalitarian regime, and yet, in both these sites, in communist countries and United States, the society came to the same conclusion that abortion became accepted sooner or later and became pretty much norm for the majority of the people. And the question is, what is behind this change which happened in the East and in the West as well? What are the causes, roots of this change, in your opinion? Mr. Kwasniewski.
I believe that we should not be tempted to say that it is a balanced position, that it was just the same in the Soviet Union or the Soviet bloc and in the West. We should remember that the West was then still faithful to the civilization of life and to the true roots of the Christianitas civilization, while the East and the Soviet Empire was already deeply burned and destroyed by the Marxist ideology. And the same Marxist ideology gave roots to the abortion movement in the West. So it is not that there are two sources of the same illness. It is the same illness that has been developed by the Marxist modern ideologies that attacked natural order of life and the civilization of life and the faith as the foundations of our civilization. And then some of them were also planted in the middle of the Western civilization. In France, it was Simone Weil who was the most vocal proponent of abortion laws in 60s and 70s. So with those kind of proponents, it's absolutely sure that it is the Marxist movement that was responsible for that. Also, speaking of the judges in 1973 in Roe versus Wade, the same idea of having privacy as a main rule of that will overrule the protection of life is also the ideology of emancipation in fact, and it runs even deeper. In Poland, abortion was firstly introduced by the German occupational forces. So in fact, it was also the modern Marxist ideology in this time, the social nationalism in Poland that introduced abortion, and then it was upheld by the Stalinist forces of the communists. And of course, it is all the emancipation ideology, it is all the Marxist ideology that opens a battle against the nature of the men. And the nature of the woman, the same. This emancipation trying to overthrow the natural law and natural rights, and of course starts with bringing down protection of life. It was one of the prosecutors of the Stalinist Poland. She was very famous of prosecuting our underground army in 50s and 60s, and she was the most well-known proponent of abortion law at the same time. As a faithful Stalinist. So yes, it is just the same ideology. It is the ideology of the neo-Marxism, Marxism then, and this ideology of emancipation that runs against the nature of men.
Let's stay in the Eastern Bloc still. Mr. Neamțu, would you agree with this description when we speak, for example, about Romania? And maybe one specific question for you. Romania was, when we speak about abortion, was doing even worse than some other countries, Central European countries. The situation was even worse. What was the specifics in Romania? Why your country accepted this practice?
Well, I'll answer those questions, but let me just say first that I'm very glad to be for the first time in my life in Bratislava. It's such a lovely city, and I'm very glad to see this beautiful and diverse audience, and I was very touched by the stories that we've just heard about the victory of the pro-life movement in the United States. Ironically, a victory which was brought about by a pretty liberal, I would say, playboy from Manhattan, who managed to marry, nonetheless, a beautiful lady, a Catholic lady from Slovenia, for the third time, I think. That was a successful story. She's a Catholic, and that's Melania Trump. Probably she had something to do with this. So overall, I'm very happy to be part of this movement, and I want to, of course, recognize some friends in the audience, and I'm really, really moved that these conservative values are promoted here in Central Europe. Now, when it comes to the genealogy of this malaise of our modern times, there are many ways of looking at it. I would probably go not necessarily to Marx, but to Friedrich Nietzsche, who said God is taught. In 1882, he produced that interesting statement, which is both a sociological commentary on the state of Christianity in Europe, but also a prophecy. And so when God is dead, fundamentally, you lose the ground. You lose any way of distinguishing between an absolute good and an absolute evil act. So that moral relativism, which was basically introduced by the collapse of old metaphysics, Christian metaphysics, that was something which enabled, I would say, the flourishing of these practices. Of course, in our country, initially the Soviets managed to, of course, liberalize abortion, but because we had a dictator who was pretty much interested in growing the number of individuals, he banned abortion. That's ironic. Nikolai Ceausescu banned abortion from 1964 to 1989. We were growing as a country because the leader of the country, though he was a Marxist and a communist, he wanted the number of people to increase because of economic, probably, calculus. In 1990, after the collapse of communism, we had the largest number of abortions being performed. That's nearly 1 million kids, unborn children, who got basically murdered. And that was a shocking moment for most of us, the young conservative Christians of those days. And what I was just saying to Mr. Saunders, the hero of the pro-life movement in America, is that because of the strong position taken by the church and because of some politicians, intellectuals, perhaps like myself, we managed to reduce, and this is a beautiful, positive account and story that you all have to take with you. We reduced the number of abortions from 1 million in 1990 to only 25,000 last year, which is an incredible reduction. So we did not change necessarily the laws, but we changed a lot the behavior, especially of the doctors, and there are lots of hospitals, public hospitals, where you cannot find one single doctor willing to perform abortion because that doctor, whether she or he, would raise the question of, freedom of conscience. And of course, this triggers a strong, staunch reaction from the radical leftists. So in a way, we've won the cultural war, but we don't have, to be honest with you, still the political leverage to change the laws. Maybe when our party, my party, our party will be in power, we have to take inspiration from Confederația and from other friends in Eastern Europe. Maybe we will change the laws too. Thank you.
Professor Saunders, would you agree with the description that, for example, that the ideas behind were Marxist in its core?
Well, I wouldn't disagree. I would put it this way. Of course, obviously, in the Soviet Empire, it was Marxism, and I'm sure you all never forget this, but in America, there's a lot of silly, uninformed talk about socialism and communism and all these young people. I mean, the kind of visions of socialism or communism, everybody's happy, everybody's fulfilled, that can grab a young person's mind, but there is too much favorable thinking about those communism and socialism in the United States, and they forget the fundamental thing, which I'm sure you all know, which socialism, in my view, has two enemies. One is, of course, the rich factory owner who doesn't care about his workers, but the other is the family. The whole point of socialism is to destroy the family. It's not to help working people, it's to destroy the family, because the family is an oppressive institution, according to them, where women are oppressed, and children are oppressed, and even the men by the institution are oppressed, and we've got to get rid of it. So in that sense, a lot of the ills that we see in the West, a lot of, like Gudrun Kugler talked about, this what I would call lifestyle liberalism, which is, I just want to have it all. I want to do everything I want to do. It's all about me. I can, and then you wake up and it's too late to have children, and you didn't realize you wanted them because society's been telling you don't. So it's kind of this lifestyle liberalism, which probably is rooted in the Marxist attack on the family. But I've got to say something else, because I'm a human rights lawyer. That is completely contrary to human rights. That's completely contrary to the agreed human rights after World War II. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and the state. That is the post-World War II consensus. So when all these crazy people are talking all these crazy things that hurt the family, and they say they're doing it in the name of human rights, they're doing it in the name of anti-human rights. After our shared experience of the Second World War, all the millions killed, all the, the numbers I've seen is twice as many innocent people as soldiers killed in that war. The world said, we don't want to have a third world war, so we're going to observe human rights. And the fundamental role of the family was recognized. So I just think there's a deep tectonic struggle between those who hate the family and those who understand that it's natural or God-given. I mean, the Catholic teaching is the same. The family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society. It's a good thing. It's not an oppressor. Where there are injustices, we correct injustices. But the institution is very good. So I guess in the end, the opposition is the Marxist opposition to the family.
Thank you.
If I could just very
Yes,
briefly
go ahead.
add something. When you destroy the family, you're left with an individual, an atomized individual, who necessarily looks up to the state and wants to get benefits, welfare benefits from the state. And so you have just the oppressive state, which is the dream of Marx, not in Das Kapital necessarily, but in the manifesto from 1848. He clearly says that. He wants to have an all-governing state suppressing the family so that the individual has no protection. That's the problem. When you get rid of the family, the state gets bigger and bigger and bigger, so you end up with tyranny. That's it.
Well, that's what's happening, right? Right now, because family is not family. People are in a deep crisis, and their relationship to family, right? So, in certain ways, situation is even worsening when we, for example, look at the topic through the lens of the family and how it works. And yet, I have heard some hope in the presentation of Mr. Bosak that something is changing to a good direction as well in Poland, that the younger generation is more polite, which is pretty much the same in the United States, as I understand. So, what do you take of that from all these 70 years of legal abortions in Central Europe? What has changed for good direction and bad direction? What is current situation when we speak about the enemy, ideological enemy, and what's getting better?
Well, I think that the main thing that is changing to the better is that we lose, or we are just during the process of losing our fascination with Brussels and European integration, because all progressive movements in in Poland, and I think in whole Central East Europe, is founded and led from Western capitals, especially from Brussels, but also from Berlin, Paris, London, Washington, whatever, New York maybe. And in Poland, this fascination about European integration and so-called big wisdom from this bureaucratic level, it's over. Still, a big majority supports presence in EU, but nobody believes that there is a different species of humankind who is wiser than we, and we have to obey on every issue what they send us to and order us to do. So I think it's the best thing, because it starts a true debate. A true debate, and we still can't agree on this, on that, but I think that we start to understand that we are on our own with our values, with our legal system, and we are just after a few years of horrible debate on the rule of law in Poland, completely hypocritic, completely out of facts, and people feel it, people see it, and it is in some way liberating, yes, because people start to create their own opinions and think more bravely. So it could start a good process, yes, but it's only a ground for a good process. It's not a good process. In fact, it's only these are conditions to start something good, yes? And on these conditions, we have to put good information, good formation, good strategy, good leadership, and then go forward and forward.
I think it's time for questions from the audience. Gudrun Kugler would like to ask.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this panel. It's very encouraging, and I see many old friends, and I'm very honored to have worked alongside you for many years. I have 3 questions. Please feel free to comment. One question is actually addressed to the church. Bill, you said the Catholic Church marched for many decades. I think it did one more thing. It actually prayed explicitly. We do not have that in Europe. In America, you walk into a Catholic parish, you will see a sign that says Tuesday, 6 o'clock, rosary to end abortion. I don't think in any of our European parishes we have ever seen anything like that. That's a key factor. What do you think? My second question goes to the far right. If this is about forming coalitions that come up with pro-life legislation at one point, it's dangerous if we lose far-right parties such as Marine Le Pen, who obviously didn't understand why pro-life is important, by supporting the right to abortion in the Constitution. I, as a Christian Democrat center-right, I do not see what happened in the far-right that she could do this. Don't let it happen, otherwise there will never be majorities. And then I have a question to all of you as representing part of the pro-life movement. In America, pro-life means end abortion legally. Pro-choice means keep abortion rare but legal. The term rare but legal. In Europe, pro-life means that. In Europe, somebody who says I'm pro-life says abortion should be rare but legal. And the pro-life position in America hardly exists in Europe. I'm saying this because I think we need to think about that. And for this reason, I want to say thank you to the Conservative Summit that the topic is on the podium, because very often it's completely missing because everybody is very much afraid and has forgotten why the topic is important at all. Thank you.
Mr. Kwasniewski, please.
As it comes to church, I think that we have the whole story in Poland with the involvement of church in the pro-life movement. In 50s and 60s, the church was in the forefront of battle for life. It was Cardinal Wyszyński who mentioned protection of unborn life among 9 of the nation's oaths that were taken in Jasna Góra, in our national sanctuary, to protect each and every unborn life against the communist law that permitted abortion. And then, of course, the church, the Catholic Church, was the beacon of organization of every pro-life movement, because as you already know, most of you, and those who are from the West should know, in the communist country it was illegal to organize any independent movement, but in Poland it was possible inside of the Catholic Church. And then in 90s and in the first decade of this century, the Church has fallen silent, besides of John Paul II. And it is the matter of the last few years, 2 or 3 years, it is a new, absolutely new event in the Polish Church, that our new young bishops are taking this topic again and are speaking openly pro-life. Our new Archbishop of Warsaw, Adrian Galbas, has just agreed to organize 1 week pro-life events next year. As a patron of this action. So yes, it is something new now. And when it comes to, but in fact, the pro-life movement in the 90s, the pro-life movement in this century, because of this position of the church, was somehow separated from the Catholic arguments. It was mostly movement of lay people, it was movement of lay organizations and lawyers and constitutional review that was in fact responsible for rising the level of protection of life in Poland. And shortly on the second question, you mentioned the far right. In Poland, it was bipartisan issue, the pro-life issue. It was not divisive so much. In each and every party, there were people pro-life and pro-abortion. Up to the moment of 2010-12, when Donald Tusk openly expelled from his party anybody who was against abortion being legal without the boundaries to 12 weeks. It was the step that expelled every pro-lifer from the Donald Tusk party. And then the pro-life case, that was in fact the Christian democracy, and that had a decalogue in its program as the first point. And that made it more partisan. But of course, as I mentioned yesterday in Bratislava at the law conference, each and every success of pro-life movement, and what already was mentioned by Krzysztof Bosak, was not thanks to any conservative government, but it was an effect of battle against the conservative governments in Poland. Every time we succeeded, it was in the battle, in a fierce battle against the conservatives and against the socialists.
Professor Saunders, how do you see the situation in states and church role? And perhaps also you can say something about new generations, which seems to be more pro-life. Why is it so?
Well, so Gudrun is right that in the U.S., the Catholic Bishops' Conference has made, we have October is the life month, pro-life month, and there are materials sent by the Bishops' Conference to every church, every parish. All the kids know about the pro-life movement, and like I said, it was the Catholic Church that started the pro-life march and that formed the backbone of the pro-life march, and it was because of the hierarchy's commitment to the issue and the education that was done through the parishes. I just want to say a parenthesis because it's not just Catholics who marched, but at the beginning it was, and because the Catholics were. I know, for instance, some of the Protestant denominations, after Roe v. Wade, actually thought it was a good decision. But over the years, they started to realize that it was an evil decision. And, you know, they saw that it was the Catholic Church that had been marching, and they joined in. Somebody said, I forgot who, at the Conservative Legal Conference, that every pro-life movement, I think at its center, has to have, in the West anyway, a Christian commitment. But it can't just be Christians, of course. It should be all Christians, but it's got to reach beyond that to make alliances. And in America, it did. I mean, people who are not religious became pro-life. You know, people of other faiths became pro-life because the moral issue of killing an innocent person is not, I mean, it's in a sense a natural law issue. It's just an obvious injustice. But it was the religious people who understood it and who committed to it and who formed it, the backbone of it, that then brings in a wider audience, a wider commitment. I think that America right now, so I'm glad I had a chance to say this, because you might have read in America there have been some pro-abortion things passed in different states. What does that mean? In my view, it's to be expected because the overturning of Roe v. Wade followed 50 years of Americans being told they had a constitutional right to abortion. Not that abortion was kind of a bad thing, but you got a freedom of speech, you got freedom of abortion. And by the way, unlimited in America. I don't care what you read or what you heard, because from Roe v. Wade, there was always a health exception, which meant abortion was available if the woman's health was at risk. And health was defined to be any factor at all, financial, familial, psychological, emotional. So any factor that was approved by the woman's doctor, who the court said the only doctor she had to ask was the abortionist. And last time I checked, abortionists get paid to do abortions, so they're going to say yes anytime you want an abortion, so there were no limits on abortion in America. So 50 years of being told this is the constitutional right, and then it gets overturned, and the liberal press is telling you the Supreme Court just took away a right. There's going to be a reaction that will last a few years, but I think it'll play out. So in America is now divided between blue states and red states. In America, red states are the conservatives. I don't know how we got that turned around, but anyway, red states are the conservatives, and in those states, those pro-life states like Florida, Texas, they are passing more and more pro-life laws, including laws that help women who need any kind of assistance. But in the blue states, the left states that are pro-abortion, they are doing things like doing investigations of crisis pregnancy centers. This man, Mamdani, who was just elected mayor of New York, has said he is going to put all of the pregnancy help centers out of business. So there is a kind of, America is split between the pro-lifers and the pro-abortion people. But until Dobbs came along, there was nothing the pro-life people could do in the law. There was plenty of pro-life work trying to help women and things, but they couldn't do anything in the law. So Dobbs is a big success, but America is split. But there's a lot of pro-life sentiment. And my own belief is that over time, we'll see that people are just miserable in those blue states, and you'll have people will move to the red states because you'll have, much more happy people, happier families, babies being born, a real pro-life, right? Pro-life is not just not abortion, it's also pro-life. So babies are a good thing, they're a gift. And so I think that will grow over time.
Thank you. Mr. Neamtu, perhaps you could say something about situation in Romania. You said there is also some positive shifts. Maybe what's the situation with the young generation? We have to be short because we have less than that time. And since your party is being labeled often as far right, you can also lose a word about this.
sometimes even Marine Le Pen can be far wrong. She probably wanted to respond to Macron because Macron was the first to introduce abortion as a legal right in the constitution. So maybe that was a tactical error that she made. Clearly that's an error, metaphysical error, tactical error, moral error. You could frame it in different ways. But Romania, thankfully, is not France. From that point of view, we can still be free as as a populist, myself, as a Christian Democrat. If Gudrun would welcome that phrase. Certainly we can celebrate life and we don't feel that we are extreme in any way, shape or form. What I would just say is that we have to continue fighting philosophically for the argument in favor of life by rejecting this idea that choice in and by itself is a good thing. You're not free because you choose. You can choose wrongly, like Germany in 1933, or you can choose well. Choosing is an act of participation into a higher good or into something bad. Now, you have to choose well in order to be free. Now, how do you choose well? By being guided by the moral intuition of the church tradition, of your family, and that's something we need to celebrate more, that there is a wisdom which is guiding us all the time, that comes from above, the wisdom of God, the divine wisdom that's always with us. And also we have to go against this liberalism that Patrick Didn very much described as basically a nihilistic account of human life. Why? Because the end result of liberalism, of secular progressive liberalism, is the total collapse of our demography, of our demographics. So, again, look at the figures. In Finland, the replacement rate is 1.25. In Africa, it's 4.3. What future are we going to have for Europe if we have these rates of replacement in secular Western Europe? There's no chance. Even Eastern Europe needs to correct itself. So let's reject liberalism. Let's reject nihilism. Let's reject Marxism. Let's reject any type of self-deluded secularism and globalism. And let's embrace tradition, Christianity, common sense, and family. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have really short time for last remark from Mr. Bosak, please.
I'm not sure whether I understood correctly the question about far right, but I do not. I think it's wrong to brand any party that is elected by the people as far right or something like that. It's a propaganda tool of our enemies to brand somebody this way. This is the first thing I would like to say. And the second is that we have the same problems in, let's say, new right parties or alternative right parties or populist parties and center-right parties. And this problem is that the majority of elected politicians don't care about values and are not educated enough to understand what my colleague on the right said just before, but because they don't. The sad truth is that the majority of politicians, no matter which party you will pick, does not understand the concept of natural law, does not understand properly what Christian values are about, why they are universal. So there is a big challenge among us to educate political activists in every political party. And I believe that conservative and Christian institutions should work with everybody, because in democracy it's completely unpredictable who will be in next government.
Thank you. And I give up my last sentence for Mr. Kwasniewski.
Protection of life is probably the only issue that we all should be radical on. Children are slaughtered, quartered, poisoned by injections, their brains are sucked out, their bodies quartered. Not somewhere there, miles away, but around the corner. We should act now on the proper level of your responsibility and your possibility. It's not only a matter of philosophy, it's not only a matter of legal expertise, of constitutional review. It's a matter of your own personal responsibility to act today.
Thank you very much. So Ladies and gentlemen, this applause belongs to Mr. Krzysztof Bosak, Jerzy Kwaśniewski, Michal Neamtu, and Professor Bill Saunders.